My father's side, there's a whole Sikh tradition. Being a Bedi, he's a descendant of Guru Baba Nanak, and that Sikh tradition continues in me. From my mother's side, there was the Buddhist tradition. Letter that my mother wrote to my uncle is such a beautiful letter, and she wrote it when she was 21 years old, and I've quoted it in the book. The area which my parents had built their huts become a hugely exclusive residential area in Lahore right now. So nobody could possibly build any huts anymore in Model Town. My father became a very well-known philosopher in Italy. My mother went on to become the highest-ranked Buddhist nun in the world. Hi, I'm Kabir Bedi, and you're watching an exclusive interview with me done by Faridoon on Hungama on my book, Stories I Must Tell, The Emotional Life of an Actor.
Now, sir, as I mentioned in the beginning, that the structuring of the book is so appealing that I think it's all about you breaking the mold after every chapter. You're surprising your readers. You will be, and that makes it so interesting. The moment revolution to religion starts, that is the chapter on your parents, you are completely thrown apart, thrown to an era that had absolute no connection with 60s, 70s, and Prathama Bedi and Praveen Babi and Sandokan and Italy and Hollywood. It is a completely different world. You're going back to your roots, born in Lahore to an English mother and a Punjabi father, communists, and how they had their journey towards spiritualism in later on. I feel that that's a story that can be made into like a web show in its own way. That is so engrossing in its own way as well. And it is so important, like an English woman fighting for India's freedom movement.
Yeah.
That must have been such a special, you mentioned about Teji Bachchanji, Amitabh Bachchan's mother in that as well. So how important is Revolution to Religion for you? And such a beautiful title.
Revolution to Religion was the graph of their lives. This was, my parents met in Oxford as students, and they came back to India. And my father's proposal to my mother was the most unromantic proposal you can imagine, because he said, I love you and I want you to marry me, but I can't promise you any security. You could be waiting outside British jails for most of your life. And this is the thing. But she loved England. She was English, she loved England, but she hated colonialism. She had a great intolerance of kind of exploitation of human beings by another. So she joined him in this freedom struggle. He was a raging communist. She was actually a hand-picked satyagrahi of Gandhi. And each gave up enormous amounts for this. They had almost no money. And how they had lived in these huts that became institutions in Lahore, where all the communists from Gyani Zail Singh who became president of India, to Inder Gujral, who became prime minister, to Harkrishan Singh Sujit, to Satish Gujral, to all these people would Balraj Sani, all these people would gather out there in their adda because they were all starving leftists who were fighting for India's freedom. And then the transition that they made, for various reasons that I go into in my book, too long to explain here, both found expression in religion. My father became a very well-known philosopher in Italy. My mother went on to become the highest-ranked Buddhist nun in the world and was responsible to a great deal for the spread of Buddhism in the West because of the institutions she created that taught Tibetan Lamas the English language. All those things are stories, but really it is a journey of the spirit. My father didn't see any contradiction between his communism and his spirituality. He said both are for the benefit of others. And he had certain gifts, certain psychic gifts by which he helped people. There's much that I learned from their journey, because from my father's side, there's a whole Sikh tradition. Being a Bedi, he's a descendant of Guru Baba Nanak, and that Sikh tradition continues in me. From my mother's side, there was the Buddhist tradition. And then my own beliefs were shaped also by the modern philosophers like Osho and Jiddu Krishnamurti, and Deepak Chopra and people like that made you think about what is the nature of reality. And I've talked in a separate chapter about my philosophical voyage, how I've discovered various truths, different kinds of truths for myself, of how, of the auras I saw, the Dalai Lama, His Holiness Dalai Lama when I met him, and Pope John Paul II when I met him. That is part of another chapter of my own spiritual journey. But Revolution to Religion is their journey, and their extraordinary journey.
Absolutely.
It involves so much sacrifice, and it involves so much selflessness and giving to others. that it's a story worth telling. And I was extremely fortunate to have parents like that, and to learn from them and to then find my own path.
No, absolutely. There's Kashmir as well in that. There is Sheikh Abdullah and Hari Singh, and so many other aspects. Now, so one thing that really fascinated me was that you've included a lot of important letters in your life. Like, for example, the letter that your mother wrote to your father's brother, elder brother, because initially they did not accept the marriage.
That's right.
Because she was a British woman, and she wrote a wonderful letter to your uncle, and that has been reproduced in the book. And there have been many other letters that you have reproduced, which makes it so interesting. Even Siddharth's letter as well we have included. So you're a collector of sorts. You like collecting.
I keep certain family records. Other family records are kept by my brother. Family records remain with me, especially my personal letters. Those, because it's hard when you're moving from country to country, city to city, to travel with a lot of things. So the things that I kept were the most precious to me, which were these letters and files and personal remembrances. And those are the ones I was finally able to quote. The letter that my mother wrote to my uncle is such a beautiful letter. And she wrote it when she was 21 years old, and I've quoted it in the book. Because, my father and his brother were like characters out of a Bollywood film. Both brothers were on wrong sides of the law. He was like a judicial magistrate in the British civil service, and my father was this revolutionary who wanted to fight the British. But they were bonded as brothers, and the judge would loan his brother his own car for his revolutionary activities if he had to, saying, "I'll just give it to my brother, I don't know what he does with it." But there was this bond between them. And also the letters that she wrote when she was in jail and before she led the first non-violent demonstration, Satyagraha, in Dera Baba Nanak, our home village, for Gandhiji, and how she was arrested and all the drama that went with it. All those letters really are things that form an essential part of the memory. And then after being arrested, she was sent to this jail where my mother was visited by my brother, because Teji Bachchan would bring my brother. Both of them, Teji Bachchan and my mother, taught English at the Women's College in Lahore and were colleagues. And at that time, Teji Bachchan was being wooed by a very dashing army major, but she chose to marry this impoverished poet who walked in pajama kurtas and chappals, who eventually became a giant of Hindi literature, and who produced India's most famous film star. So these associations go back a long way.
Right. And have you gone back to Lahore, sir, after partition? Did you visit your hometown?
Yes. I've never thought of Lahore as my hometown because I really grew up in Delhi. But it's the town where I was born.
Yes.
And I have gone back to Lahore since then. I went for the premiere of my film Taj Mahal, where I played Shah Jahan. It was a wonderful premiere that we had. And the hospitality and warmth of the people of Lahore was extraordinary. I've never felt more home in a foreign place, because it was just everyone speaking Punjabi, wahi sharab, wahi kebab, wahi rubab. So it was a wonderful place to go back to. And the area which my parents had built their huts has become a hugely exclusive residential area in Lahore right now. So nobody could possibly build any huts anymore in Model Town. But in those days they did, because it was just barren ground on the edge of town. But Lahore was the capital of undivided Punjab, and it had its own great history of being ruled by the Mughals and the British and all the people that came before them. And it had all these magnificent monuments that were there. I don't remember any of that because I was just born there, and then partition happened and the family came to India.
Okay.
But then that led to a whole chapter of my parents going to Kashmir and being advisors to Sheikh Abdullah, which is a separate chapter in the book. I
think people should read the book for that.
Hi, I'm Kabir Bedi. and you're watching an exclusive interview with me done by Faridoon on Hungama on my book, Stories I Must Tell, The Emotional Life of an Actor.